in the strategic plan, having a really clear end goal, but a little bit more looseness around like how to actually get there, right? Like the world's always changing, your circumstances are always changing. Everyone can kind of resonate with that leading an organization like this, I think.
I think that that's the problem with sometimes with our strategic plans or whatever, is that we're so focused on the journey. We're so focused on what step we're making and when and how much it's going to cost, that when you build that rigidity into your plan, you're not ready to take those opportunities that would get you to your end goal more quickly or more effectively.
More and more, I think we have to be better communicators in this space. Like, how do we take those big scientific concepts that are esoteric, inaccessible, unequitable, I'll even say at times, for the community that we're trying to reach, and break them down into stories, into narratives, into conversations that are more accessible, more human.
It's not to say that this is just like loosey-goosey, like, hey, here's an opportunity and I have a gut feeling that it's going to get me to where I want to go. It's one where I feel like I could look a donor or supporter in the face and be like, this is going to help us deliver impact more quickly.
I'm Eric Ressler.
I'm Jonathan Hicken.
And this is Designing Tomorrow.
Jonathan, it is 2026. Welcome, my friend.
Welcome to 2026, Eric Ressler.
So first Designing Tomorrow pod of the year, at least in the studio here. How are you feeling about the year, man?
I'm so excited. This year, like, do you know the nonprofit life cycle?
Yeah, we've talked about this.
We talked about this. Like, I feel like we're on this, like, we went through the rebirth period and we're like on that upward arrow now, and like 26 is the year. Like, it's happening.
Awesome, man. So, okay. So today's topic is something I've been thinking about for a long time as I've been working with nonprofit organizations over the last 16 plus years now, I get to say, in 2026. And this pattern is something that I'm calling the cost of someday. And I'd be curious to hear kind of like your reaction to that, since that's the first time you're hearing it. But the way that I think about this is these projects, these ideas, an opportunity sometimes that just comes up, and watching leaders and organizations just not pounce when they have an opportunity to on these windows of opportunity, these things that become available. And, honestly, frankly, what happens sometimes is people hit us up for a big project or a rebrand or some kind of transformation, and for whatever reason, it falls through. And then every once in a while, I kind of just like check in on that org, and 2, 3, 4, 5 years will go by, and it looks like basically nothing has changed. And so people get stuck. And so I wanted to talk about this in a meta way, the cost of someday, this fallacy, I think, this inclination in the space, in the sector more largely. But I want to do it in kind of an interesting way, which is to talk about the project of building out Seymour Studios, where we're recording from, as a kind of antithesis to the cost of someday, more into what does it look like when you see an opportunity and you just pounce on it.
I'm already imagining there are a million ideas that come my way as an executive director. You should do this. You should do that. You should do this. I'm constantly screening like, oh, is it a distraction? Who do I need to get approval from? Do I have the right team to do it? Do I have the money to do it, right? There's a lot of good reasons why you might stall, but you need to be ready when the opportunity comes up to go.
Right.
And the studio is an example of that.
Okay, so let's talk about the story of how this came to be. So circa Q4 last year or so, we were looking at, hey, what's the future of this podcast look like from a production standpoint? We can't keep recording this out of Eric's backyard. And I'm noticing I just referred to myself in the third person, which feels weird. And I'm not ever going to do that again. But out of my own backyard. And so we started spinning on like, there's got to be like a plug and play podcast studio. Like, how do we do something? So without like getting into the details, there's another org locally who I thought would be perfect for this. And I brought this vision to them of not just a podcast studio for us, but a media center for the social impact space here in Santa Cruz County. And frankly, I think it was kind of a slam dunk for them. They're in a moment where they were trying to figure out what was next. It all felt like it could kind of come together. And basically, it just stalled out. The cost of someday, right? And so I remember very distinctly, you and I went on a walk here at Westcliff, and we were just kind of catching up, talking shop. And I brought this idea to you, and I just saw this kind of like light bulb moment go off in your brain. Let's rewind to that. Like, what was going on for you when we were talking about that?
In that exact moment, what was going on is that for years I've been hearing from my community and the people I serve, and just real quick, I mean, we work with scientists at UC Santa Cruz. We work with community partners working on environmental issues, marine issues in Santa Cruz County. So from my colleagues in those spaces, I've been hearing from them, or I had been hearing from them, that they had stories to tell, but it either took too much time, too much money, or expertise they didn't have. And so they didn't move on it. Yeah. And when you brought up this idea of like a turnkey solution for people to get stories out, I instantly connected it to the problem I was seeing with the people I'm working with most closely.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing now is like basically this is a problem that's just been kind of like irking you for a while, or that you've seen this opportunity for a while. Why didn't you act on it sooner?
Well, so we have been acting on it.
Okay.
But the way we were acting on it was not as effective as this, I think. So, like, look, this is like a role that museums and science centers and aquariums, this is a role we play often in the community of like finding and sharing stories within the community, right?
Yeah.
The problem is for many of us, getting a story, something new, something fresh, something relevant, getting that out to the community quickly is really hard in sort of a traditional exhibit space because it takes years and a lot of money to build an exhibit. And more often than not, the moment has come and gone.
Sure.
And you're late once you get the thing into your dang museum. So,
yeah.
So we had been trying to play this role of telling stories and making it easy for them. It was just too slow and too expensive.
Yeah. I mean, I think we should talk a little bit about the kind of unspoken or unseen friction of media production. And honestly, like even from our own show, right, where, back in the day before this studio, we were recording in my studio, which required setup and breakdown each time, which meant, okay, now we have to batch episodes to make that worthwhile. We didn't have the gear set up in the same way that made it kind of like turnkey, like our setup is here right now. And that friction kills creativity. It kills opportunity to the point that you were off the show for many months simply because of technical friction, which is so silly. And I mean, we could have recorded in a closet and not done a video podcast and blah, blah, blah. But I think video is really important. And we're seeing video become more and more important, even though a lot of people still listen, even when they're on YouTube. I do it myself. So it's just kind of weird to say that. So all of that to say, I think a big element of this play for the Seymour Center and for our pod is really just that turnkey element of it. I mean, literally, I drove over here, we sat down, we riffed on this idea for a little bit, and we hit record, and we're off to the races.
Yeah, it took all of 5 minutes, 10 minutes to get going?
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, like there are other recording studios in our community, even at UC Santa Cruz. The problem is that they're too complicated. It takes a certain level of training to operate it. It takes too long. It's expensive to rent it out. A certain kind of asset exists, but not one that makes it dead simple and dead easy for anybody, regardless of your skill level, to come in and start creating something.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to take this back to the bigger framing of this episode, though, which is really about, like, I'm curious to hear, like, as you work with other social impact leaders in your ecosystem, like, what are some of the other flavors of this kind of, like, cost of someday that you've seen, or maybe others where you kind of regret not pouncing on an opportunity, many years later. And, once you did, you're like, oh, I really should have done this sooner.
Yeah, look, like personally, I fall on the spectrum of like a risk-taking kind of executive director to begin with. So a lot of my mistakes are actually jumping on something too early. However, I mean, there still are examples of times where things have gotten stuck. And actually, many of those examples have happened at institutions I was at previously. But some of those obstacles are first want board approval, right? Executive directors are concerned. They don't ever bring it to the board because they just know that they're not going to get approval, or they know it's going to be a fight. Two, it feels like a distraction. Something, a big opportunity may feel like a distraction.
Yep.
Although I have some caveats on that.
Okay.
Or they're not immediately seeing the return, whether that's the financial return or the impact return, either way. And so, you put it into this bucket of someday. But that bucket fills up pretty quickly. And the question becomes, like, how do you sort through what's in there to decide how to move?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to acknowledge, like, I think striking the right balance here is a bit of an art. And you and I are very similar in that I get excited by new opportunities and tend to be a little bit, maybe sometimes too risk-taking and saying yes on certain things, which is, ebbs and flows in my leadership style, depending on all the things. But I mean, if you look at the kind of flip side of that, it's the 3-year strategic plan. If it's not in the strategic plan, it's not happening. The strategic plan has to be approved by this stakeholder group and this board, and the board only meets quarterly. And there's this kind of, this pace. And sometimes that's right. No shade to organizations that can run effectively that way. That's a style, and there's not only one way of doing this. But I do also think that there's sometimes a need to be more opportunistic, creative, open. And what I've noticed in working with, literally at this point, hundreds of different social impact organizations is that it really comes down to two things in my mind. One being leadership, and two being culture. And those two things are very closely correlated. And when I see leaders who create organizations in motion, there's this kind of buzz, this energy, this excitement. And that's something, you could say has to be earned, right? Like it has to be the right conditions. There has to be enough revenue. There has to be enough capacity. But actually, I feel like it's the opposite. I feel like that energy and that buzz is what creates capacity, what creates opportunity, what creates that culture that allows for a certain amount of risk taking or new opportunities or trying things or just kind of staying in motion. And I'd just be curious to hear like how that resonates with you and if you've experienced something similar.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this studio alone is a perfect example of it. Once I started telling people at UC Santa Cruz and in the community about it, the amount of interest in coming and using it or being featured on a show, the show I'm going to launch soon, right? Like that, it's starting to flood. We quickly got a grant to fund some of the equipment in the studio and to fund some interns doing some content. We have graduate students who are in science communication programs approaching us now saying, hey, we want to make use of this. So there's an influx of energy that came simply from being able to say, we have this new asset. And frankly, that was kind of part of the idea all along.
Sure.
From my end, right? Is like, I knew that once we had this asset in place, the opportunities were going to start coming to us. And it's already begun to happen. So there's no doubt that there is some directionality there about, hey, you create the opportunity and then capacity follows.
Hey friends, real quick before we continue today's episode. I'm Eric Ressler, founder and creative director at Cosmic. Cosmic is a creative agency purpose-built for nonprofits and mission-driven organizations. For the last 15 years, we've helped leaders like you nail your impact story and sharpen your strategy. But we're not here to just leave you with a fancy slide deck and a pat on the back. We roll up our sleeves and help you bring our ideas to life through campaigns, creative, and digital experiences. Our work together helps you earn trust, connect deeply with your supporters, and grow your fundraising and your impact. If you value the thinking we share here and want it applied to your biggest challenges, let's talk at designbycosmic.com. All right, back to today's conversation. So I'd like to dig into that more deeply around like for our listeners who are maybe executive directors, maybe on the board, maybe not in a leadership position, but wanting to move the organization forward. Like, how do we embody as a sector, as individual organizations, as individual leaders, a different approach to doing this work that is not this kind of we'll get to that later, or, what's talked about all the time is a scarcity mindset, which is sometimes real, right? Driven by true scarcity. But I've been thinking about this a lot in running Cosmic over the last couple of years, which have been bumpy with everything going on at the federal level and just like budgets being all over the place, projects getting canceled last minute. I found myself last year, and we've talked about this before on the pod, kind of falling into that same scarcity mindset that I've been preaching against for so many years. And so, like, how do you balance that as a leader between not getting distracted by shiny object syndrome, which is kind of like the near enemy of this approach, but also like leaving some space to be more reactive, opportunistic, less kind of just like, this is the way it's always been done. This isn't in the strategic plan. Like, how do you think about that when you're doing your work?
A relentless pursuit of the end goal. I think a lot of when I say by that is for our case is becoming this collaborative center for coastal resilience right here in Santa Cruz, right? That's helping this community become more resilient to the changing ocean and coast.
Yeah.
And inspiring the next generation of scientists to do that work, right? For me, that is the end goal that I am relentlessly pursuing. And our strategic plan is focused on that more than it is the journey. Right. And I think that's the problem with sometimes with our strategic plans or whatever, is that we're so focused on the journey. We're so focused on what step we're making and when and how much it's going to cost that when you build that rigidity into your plan, you're not ready to take those opportunities that would get you to your end goal more quickly or more effectively. So it's this mentality of this relentless pursuit of the end goal and allowing flexibility in your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple things that I want to riff on there. So one, it becomes apparent to me, and this should have been obvious before this recording, but clarity of purpose as a brand and like a really clear crystallized version of a vision is what allows you to pursue that so relentlessly, right? Because if that's vague and it's just like, where are we going? This this kind of lack of clarity of directionality you just like can't by definition do it.
And that's the cost of someday happens with that exact example all the time, right? Because without that clarity, a great idea could feel distracting, right? Because it's not on your path.
Right.
Right? It's not on that journey. If you've planned based purely on the journey, something that's off to the side is going to feel like a distraction.
Right.
Which, like, don't get me wrong, like having a clear sense of what is a distraction and what's not is important. But I think that can exist within this mode of thinking.
Yeah, and I think like distractions can show up in a couple different ways, and they can be driven by, grant opportunities or funder priorities or donor priorities, right? There's so many different flavors. So I think like having that clarity of purpose, that like really crystallized vision around like we are becoming this, becomes so important in knowing what to say yes and what to say no to. And I think maybe what I'm hearing and what I've experienced before and what I've seen with other leaders is when that's clear, those opportunities to pounce become much more like you can make them much more confidently because you're like, oh, this is aligned. And it's almost like a feeling. It's just like this feels right because this is where we're going, and this I could see how this could get us closer there. I also like the other thing you talked about, maybe we could riff on, which is like in the strategic plan, having a really clear end goal, but a little bit more looseness around like how to actually get there, which is something that resonates a lot with me because I see these really rigid strategic plans that assume everything's going to go to plan, and it never does, right? Like the world's always changing, your circumstances are always changing. Is it Mike Tyson? Everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face. Everyone can kind of resonate with that leading an organization like this, I think.
And when the idea to build this studio for ourselves and for the community came up, I screened it against our strategic plan, so to speak. And our strategic plan, it was built in this sort of like the end game mode rather than the journey kind of mode. The other thing I did is I screened it against our goals for the year because I was like, I knew that this was going to take me a couple of months of my time. And I needed to ask myself, is this investment of my time going to get us towards the short-term goals too? And the answer was yes in both cases. It's not to say that this is just like loosey-goosey, like, hey, here's an opportunity and I have a gut feeling that it's going to get me to where I want to go.
Yeah.
Right? It's one where I feel like I could look a donor or supporter in the face and be like, this is going to help us deliver impact more quickly. And this is going to get us to our end goal more quickly than what I thought was going to get us there originally.
Yeah. I mean, that's even kind of a good way potentially of screening opportunities like this. Or, if you're a leader trying to get out of this culture of cost of, the someday, it might be worth thinking about like, how do I justify this to my internal team? How do I justify this to my donors or to my funders or to my board? And if I don't feel like I have a confident story for that, a confident, logical way to see that, that might be a sign, hey, this is actually a distraction. Because let's be real, there are plenty of opportunities for distractions.
Yeah, I mean, I had someone suggest that we bring in like literal live elephant seals into the Seymour Center once. And
I thought you were going to say into the studio. I was like, let's do it, man. Let's go.
And by the way, elephant seals are like the size of a pickup truck. Like they're massive.
Yeah.
And so that was an example of like, I looked at our strategic plan and our goals for the year.
Live elephant seals were in there?
Did not fit, right?
Yeah, right?
I mean, obviously that's an extreme example, but that's the level of like discernment that we have to have. It was easy for me to know that an elephant seal wasn't going to fit. But I still need to go through the same process. I need to say, does this get us to our end goal more effectively than what we're already doing? And does it also help us achieve our short-term goals too, right? Both are important.
So I'd be curious to hear, we're kind of, and part of our plan here is to do a little bit of a behind-the-scenes build-in-public style series of case study episodes on this studio build-out and your transformation as, the Seymour Center. What's some of the kind of just like early feedback been like from your team, from your supporters, from the community? You've hinted at this, but I'm wondering if we could go a little deeper there.
Yeah, so I mean, interest from now. Granted, I've socialized it in a limited scope so far because I don't want to overwhelm myself or my team too quickly with a problem which I ultimately want. The problem I ultimately want is too much interest in using the space, but I don't want to get there too quickly. We'll get there. When I have been showing off the space to people who might be interested, they have been thrilled and so excited and asking about how they can begin to use it themselves. And that's been actually really interesting. The first thought that I'm observing is people imagining how they're going to use it for themselves, not, hey, how do I get on your show?
Yeah.
Right? Which...
So like perceiving it as like a community resource.
Yes, exactly. This is something that's good for me, which is exactly the kind of response I want. Because it's not about me. It's not about Seymour Center. It's about the community. It's about the end state, right? It's about the relentless pursuit of that end goal. And more people using the space to tell the stories of Science Solution Santa Cruz is good for the end goal.
Yep.
And people see themselves in it. People see the opportunity and they see the doors opening for them getting their story out. Like, I really believe that that's the sense.
What have you heard? I'm just curious, like from folks in the community who are interested in utilizing this space, this asset that you've created, that we've created. Like, what was stopping them? Like, what was their cost of someday, or why was it a someday for them?
Yeah, make no mistake, everybody wants to tell their story.
Yeah.
I work with passionate people in science and in environmental work, right, across the campus and the community. People, they care, and they believe other people should care too. But time and time again, for years now, Eric, I've been hearing telling stories takes too much time, it's too expensive, or I don't have the right team with the right skills to do it.
Yep.
It's really those three things over and over and over again. And the way that you and I built this studio was deliberately to solve all three of those problems. Fast, simple, you don't need a lot of expertise to use it, and inexpensive. And we did that. Like, we've successfully built the studio in that way.
Which I wonder is like, as I think more about the future of where kind of brand building and content is going, especially in the social impact space, like I do think people are expecting and yearning for more content like this, whether it's podcasts or video or just like authentic human content that is not necessarily always academic, long form, dry. I mean, there's a need for that stuff too. Don't get me wrong, especially for particular, very heavily science-based or evidence-based or research-based work. But more and more, I think we have to be better communicators in this space. Like, how do we take those big scientific concepts that are esoteric, inaccessible, unequitable, I'll even say at times, for the community that we're trying to reach, and break them down into stories, into narratives, into conversations that are less polished, but more accessible, more human, more interesting, I'm just going to say, and something you can like listen to on your drive or while you're doing dishes or while you're at the gym versus like, I'm going to sit down and read a research paper right now.
Santa Cruz is not unique in the sense that there are so many stories worthy of telling. And the friction that we were talking about earlier, right, exists, and that's what's keeping these stories from getting out. You know, I think about the sort of the underlying content generation strategy here being like a quantity not over quality, but like a quantity play.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, we did an episode talking about like, you did an interview about
with
like
Mike Nellis.
Well, about how like you just gotta put shit out, and you gotta do it a lot and consistently.
Yeah, I remember Mike was like beating himself up for only doing a daily live stream. Just like, wow, the bar is very different for you, my friend, compared to most people we're working with. Yeah.
So I remembered that, like, and I know there's an abundance of stories in town and an abundance of voices that are worthy of hearing, and are worthy of amplifying. And so I put all those three things together, and I'm like, well, we got to do a quantity play.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my strategy, to your question about what are some of the early indicators I'm getting, it's like I'm inviting as many people as I can right now to come and use this space and just experiment. We're going to experiment with all kinds of different content. There's a SciComm student, that's a science communication student, who has this idea of a show called STEM Girl Summer, where she interviews women field researchers about their experience of being women in science and in the field.
Amazing.
I'm like, fucking great. Like, come do that here, and be a part of Seymour Studios. And there are dozens of ideas I've heard similar to those already.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So as we kind of like wrap up on this one, first of all, to say like, let's challenge listeners in 2026 when we're releasing this episode. We're at the beginning right now. Let's try and shed that someday mentality in this sector. And I think, let's acknowledge that we're in, a tough time for a lot of folks right now who might not be in that mindset, and that's okay too. Like, we're not here to judge that. But I think that energy, I can see it in our work together. I can see it in my work at Cosmic. I can see it in the work that we do with our clients, that there's this buzz that can happen when there's that culture around that, the internal leadership and the champions for this work. And so that's a challenge to our listeners. I think the takeaway from this interview is, if you can be clear about that crystallized version of where are you going as an organization, what's that direction, what's that desired future state, then you have the confidence and the opportunities to like step into those opportunities, not just kind of like put them on the back burner forever. Any other takeaways from you?
Yeah, I'm just honestly, more advice for the listeners is like, you got to get your reps in. So what I recommend is the next time, literally like tomorrow, when you go to work and someone pitches you a new idea, just get the reps in of screening that idea against your vision, against your end state, and against your near-term goals. Like, just build that muscle so that you are just constantly on the prowl for that next opportunity that's going to help you get to your end state faster. Get your reps in.
Jonathan, thank you, man. We're going to keep going on this case study over the course of a few episodes and kind of share a little bit of a peek behind the curtain as this keeps going. But yeah, this has been fun, man.
Right on, man. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe, or even leave us a comment. It really helps. Thank you. And thank you for all that you do for your cause and for being part of the movement to move humanity and the planet forward.